What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Nash here. Welcome back to the channel. And today is prediction video day because we've got my predictions for the Elimination Chamber, where for the first time in its history will take place in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So this will be a very interesting development because if you guys remember, aside from Crown Jewel last October, the last time it took place in Jeddah was, I think, what Super Showdown 2019? If I remember correct, I don't remember. It was either 2019 or 20. I think 2020 it took place in Riyadh, but yeah, crazy. Pretty crazy. And it's taking place inside, I believe, the Jeddah Superdome, which is one of the largest venues in the world. One of the largest venues in the world. I think the second largest venue would probably have to be SoFi Stadium, if I remember correctly. But anyway, this is going to be a hell of a card because we've got 8 matches on the card, 4 title matches, one of them being locked inside the Elimination Chamber with a second Elimination Chamber match, a Falls Count Anywhere match, which we'll get to that in a second, and of course a tag team match as well. And this one that I'm going to talk about is just based on respect. The Miz and Rey Mysterio. Now here's the thing about The Miz. Let's just keep it real. He's an ass. Let's just keep it real. He is an ass. If you guys remember, not this past Monday, but last week, on Raw, Miz tripped himself. Let's just keep it real. Miz tripped himself, and it was it was something. It was something. And then of course too, he even told Dom, told Ray's son, Dominik, he told Dom, I noticed that, and I quote, I noticed that you're a lot taller than Ray. Are you sure you're not Eddie's son? Obviously referencing the rivalry that Ray had with Eddie Guerrero back in 2005 in the summer over who was truly Dom's father, which was, it was a hell of a rivalry. I'll give it that. I will give it that. I will give it that. I will give the rivalry the respect it deserves. That was a hell of a rivalry, which culminated at SummerSlam, where Ray ended up grabbing the custody papers for Dom, which took a toll on Dom's mental health, actually, which is pretty bizarre. But now obviously those two, Ray and Dom, are now even stronger than ever. Because if you guys remember on SmackDown, when they were a part of SmackDown last year, they had they had their ups and downs. Now they're on Raw, and they're even more stronger than we had ever thought, which is insane. But I have to admit, The Miz trying to split a wedge between the two just proves how much of an ass he is. But if there's anybody that can shut Miz up, I think it's going to be Rey Mysterio. So my pick, Rey Mysterio. Next up, and I actually have my book here. The book is like right next to me here on my bed. Next up, we have one of the most unique matches that we have on the card. We have Sonya Deville and the SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair taking on the team of Naomi and Ronda Rousey. This is actually, I believe this is the first time in almost 3 years that I've had the honor to call a Ronda Rousey match, which is just insane. The thing about Ronda is one question: will ring rust come into play? That is the big question that a lot of people always ask when a superstar comes back into the ring. The question is, does ring rust come into play? The answer is yes. Ring rust will always come into play. But this is Ronda Rousey we're talking about here. This is Ronda Rousey. She just had a kid within the last year and a half. She has her own Twitch, which is awesome. She has her own YouTube channel, which is awesome. She has pretty much everything that someone of her caliber could ever want. And I think she also has her own like farm or something like that, if I'm correct. But as far as like what I've seen on social media anyway, but yeah, ring rust will definitely come into play. And this is interesting too, because you have 4 different clash of styles. You have Naomi, who's more of a who's more of a high flyer, you know, who's got the agility, the high flying capabilities. Then you got Charlotte Flair, who's more power and strength, if you will. Then you've got Sonya Deville, who's more of a technical wrestler, if you will. And then you got Ronda Rousey, who is a submission master, which is insane. So the question becomes, again, does ring rust come into play for Ronda Rousey, and will Naomi be able to help her get that ring rust out? That is the big question, and I think Charlotte Flair and Sonya Deville are going to try to split a wedge between Rousey and Naomi, so Rousey would turn on Naomi as she did on the fans when she turned heel right before WrestleMania in MetLife Stadium. This time it's the old Ronda Rousey that we remembered when she debuted back in 2018, which is awesome. But I have to admit, again, this is going to be a very interesting matchup, but I think ring rust, again, as I said before, ring rust may come into play, but I think if there's anybody that can shut up Sonya Deville and Charlotte Flair on the road to WrestleMania, hands down, it has to be Naomi and Ronda Rousey. Next up, we actually have the Women's Elimination Chamber match, where the winner will face the Raw Women's Champion at WrestleMania. Now, this is interesting because think of the participants that are in this chamber. You have Rhea Ripley, you have Nikki ASH, Liv Morgan, Doudrop, Bianca Belair, and get this, Alexa Bliss. Now there are quite a few questions that must be answered. That has to be answered. For Alexa Bliss, will ring rust come into play? Will we see the old goddess that we all used to know and love, or will we even see the Alexa Bliss from last year? What are we gonna see from Alexa Bliss? Get this, we have not seen her in action since last September. Since last September, when she challenged Charlotte Flair for the Raw Women's title, when Flair was the Raw Women's Champion. And that was when Charlotte Flair decided to take Lily, or I guess Lily, and just tear her up to shreds. And Alexa Bliss just had a meltdown. She was fucking upset. And then, of course, too, this past Monday on Raw, and of course, over the last few weeks, we saw the return of Alexa Bliss, and the question now becomes this, because Lily is now, or I guess the remnants of Lily is now inside the Lily doll that can be bought on WWEshop.com. Of course, no copyrights, big shout out. Y'all know how this works with the algorithm. And that doctor of hers, said, Lily's in your heart. Lily will always have your back. And with that said, the question now becomes, which version of Alexa Bliss are we going to see? We're going to find out Saturday, but I think, honestly, we need to see the guys. We need to see the guys, because this version of Alexa Bliss, the Alexa Bliss that was like, that would just like play with the doll and go on a swing or what. That Alexa Bliss did not win a single championship. But the Goddess, on the other hand, multi-time Raw Women's Champion, former SmackDown Women's Champion, Money in the Bank, 2-time Women's Tag Team Champion. Those are the accolades of the goddess. But the twisted Alexa Bliss didn't win a single thing. She did not win anything. Nothing. No Money in the Bank, no Royal Rumble, nothing. This Alexa Bliss, the Alexa Bliss that we saw back in September, we don't need that Alexa Bliss. We need the goddess. I think if the goddess comes back, then I truly believe she could very may well be the odds-on favorite going into this match, because other than her, Liv Morgan, because other than Liv Morgan, Bliss is the only person, the only one of the whole field that's been inside the Elimination Chamber before. But unlike Liv Morgan, Alexa Bliss actually won an Elimination Chamber match. That actually being the first ever Women's Elimination Chamber match back in 2018 when she was the Raw Women's Champion. So the question now becomes, who becomes the odds-on favorite? Hands down, Rhea Ripley and Alexa Bliss are indeed the odds-on favorites, because if you guys remember this past Monday on Raw, Rhea Ripley went through the whole field in that gauntlet match, only to be eliminated, only to have been pinned by Bianca Belair. So Rhea Ripley and Alexa Bliss are definitely the odds-on favorites. I would probably say Doudrop would probably be the dark horse. And Nikki and Liv Morgan would probably have to be the wild card. Because Liv Morgan, she's had multiple opportunities at the Raw Women's title, only to come this close. So who do I think is going to win? I think honestly, as big of a fan as I am of Alexa Bliss, I would have to say Doudrop. I would have to say Doudrop might win it. Ooh, excuse me. But I'm not holding my breath. I think it'll come down between Alexa Bliss and Rhea Ripley. I think one of those two might win it, but only time will tell. Only time will tell. We will find out on Saturday. Next up, we have Drew McIntyre versus Madcap Moss in a Day 1 rematch, but this time, Falls Count Anywhere. What are the rules of Falls Count Anywhere? It's simple. No countouts, no DQ. Only way to win is by pinfall or submission, and it can happen anywhere in Jeddah. Anywhere inside the Jeddah Superdome. It can even happen outside of the Jeddah Superdome. It can happen in Riyadh for all we fucking know. But that's the danger of Falls Count Anywhere, is that it can happen anytime, anywhere within your surroundings, if you will. And here's the thing. The last time these two faced off, as I said, was back at Day 1, where Drew McIntyre did defeat Madcap Moss, but it came at a price, because Drew McIntyre was taken out with a severe neck injury, and the doctors told him, "Hey, you're not going to make it to WrestleMania." What did Drew McIntyre do? He busted his ass, rehabbed the living shit out of his neck, and came back at the Royal Rumble and eliminated both Corbin and Madcap Moss. Yeah. He actually did that. And now the rivalry continues with Moss and McIntyre in Falls Count Anywhere. Honestly, there is no way that Madcap Moss can defeat Drew McIntyre in this environment, because this is Drew McIntyre's wheelhouse. So I gotta go with Drew McIntyre on this one. Next up, we have a match that was supposed to have happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, at a pay-per-view known as Super Showdown in 2020, Goldberg defeated Bray Wyatt the Fiend to win his second Universal title. He went on to SmackDown not too long after that and said, "Who's next?" Roman Reigns showed up and said, "I'm next." We were supposed to have had the match at WrestleMania 36, when it was originally supposed to have been held in Raymond James Stadium. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that did not come to pass. And I know I shouldn't have said COVID-19, but it is, it is exactly what it is. But again, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that match did not come to pass. Roman left WWE because he wanted to make sure that his family was safe, and he wanted to make sure that he was safe because of his leukemia. And I don't blame him for that. I do not blame him for that at all. So who took Roman's place? None other than Braun Strowman, or I guess Adam Scherr is his actual name, but Braun Strowman took his place, became Universal Champion, and held the title until SummerSlam, where Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, ended up regaining his Universal title, only to have lost it a week later to Roman Reigns, which was a hell of a match. Insanely, it was an insane match. I think it was I think it was like a no holds barred triple threat, which was insane. And from that point going forward, Roman Reigns has been champion since then. And since then, he has defeated so many superstars over the last year and almost 2 years. He's defeated guys like Jey Uso, not once but twice. He's defeated Drew McIntyre. He's beaten Kevin Owens, 3 times? 4 times now, which is just absurd. He has defeated, I'm actually going back on my book here. He actually defeated Daniel Bryan when DB won the Elimination Chamber, where the winner would end up facing off against Roman Reigns later on in the night. But Roman was like, you know what, fuck this. I don't want to stay here all night. I'm doing this now. And then at Fastlane, again, against DB, which was pretty insane. WrestleMania, he defeated both Edge and Daniel Bryan, which is crazy. Then, of course, against Cesaro, which was a hell of a matchup. Moving on into Hell in a Cell, originally supposed to have took place inside Hell in a Cell, did not come to pass because, well, he faced off against Rey Mysterio on SmackDown. And then, of course, Roman Reigns against Edge at Money in the Bank. John Cena was his next victim. You know, Montez Ford was another one. Finn Balor, the Demon. I never thought we would ever see the Demon back after all these years. Crown Jewel against Brock Lesnar. Survivor Series against Big E when Big E was WWE Champion, which now he's on SmackDown, which is kind of, and then of course Day One. Of course at Day One, originally he was supposed to have faced Brock Lesnar at Day One, but because that Roman actually tested positive for COVID-19, Brock Lesnar ended up becoming WWE Champion. And then, of course, the Royal Rumble at our last pay-per-view against Seth freaking Rollins. And now it comes to this. A match that was supposed to have happened 2 years ago, but now it's happening now. Roman Reigns, Goldberg, the Universal title. A battle to see who has the better spear. Obviously, Edge and Roman, proved that Roman Reigns had the better spear. This time is different because Roman Reigns is facing off against yet another Hall of Famer in Goldberg. But here's the kicker. Roman Reigns has beaten every single person that has been Universal Champion. Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, Braun Strowman. That is a total of 6. 6 Universal Champions, or actually the Fiends. The Fiend would make 7, I believe. The Fiend would make 7. Bray Wyatt, 7 men. 7 men. If Roman Reigns beats Goldberg. If that were to be the case. Is it possible? Absolutely. It is 100% possible, but let's not forget, this is Goldberg we're talking about here. This is Goldberg. Let's not forget about one important detail. Go back to SummerSlam. He suffered a knee injury. Roman Reigns will attempt to exploit it, and Goldberg, and I even, you guys know, I talked about this on the channel not too long after SummerSlam. In one of my WWE news videos, I talked about Goldberg not wanting to get the knee surgery. He's fucking lost it. I mean, I get the fact that he wants to, win back the Universal title, but at what cost? At what cost? What's the cost for Goldberg trying to go after the title? The answer is knee surgery, because if Roman Reigns exploits that knee injury and that knee breaks, Goldberg won't have a choice but to get the surgery and get the knee rehabbed so he can come back to the ring. But if he does that, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, he gets the surgery and he's out for about a year and a half, or B, he gets the surgery and the doctors tell him, you're done. You cannot come back. You cannot go back to in-ring competition. Those are the two scenarios. Worst case scenario. I think the best case scenario for Goldberg after the surgery and rehab, he's back within 8-9 months. 9 months, 10, maybe even a year at the max. As far as not being able to come back, worst case scenario, doctors tell him that he needs to retire. That's like the worst case scenario. So, who do I think is going to win? I think, honestly, you really can't bet against Roman, given how dominant he's become. Although I will admit, I know you guys are probably thinking, why are you praising Roman? You talk shit about him on Twitter and whatnot. Yeah, that's true, but let's not forget, this is Roman Reigns we're talking about here. So, of course, I gotta try and give, I try to give credit where credit is due. That's just who I am, but you can't bet against Roman, but you can't bet against Goldberg either. So, I think, honestly, if it comes down to it, I would have to say Roman Reigns for 2 reasons. 1, the Usos. 2, Paul Heyman. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. But speaking of the Usos, we got the Usos versus the Viking Raiders for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. A match that was supposed to have happened, I believe, at the Royal Rumble. Either at the Royal Rumble or at Day 1. It was one or the other. But unfortunately, it did not come to pass. Now it's finally coming to pass. This is a very interesting matchup because the Usos, they've been dominant. They've been tag team champions since Money in the Bank last July, when they defeated the Mysterios to win the SmackDown Tag Team titles. And oof, big shout outs to Mountain Dew. Big shout outs to Mountain Dew. Love Mountain Dew. Awesome soda. There, I said it. Don't at me in the comments. But the Usos, they've been tag team champions since last July when they defeated the Mysterios to win their 7th tag team title. Obviously under controversy, of course, which was bullshit. But the thing about the Usos is, even with with or without Roman Reigns, they will always be one of the top tag teams in the world. One of the best tag teams in the world. Second to, obviously, New Day. But unfortunately, the name the New Day will no longer be intact. It will actually be done. Why? You'll have to wait and find out. Wait and find out in a future news video. But I have to admit, this is a very unique matchup because they're going up against one of the most dominant tag teams in the world in the Viking Raiders. They've won tag team titles in Japan, all over the world, in NXT and Monday Night Raw. And I think aside from the Street Profits, I believe aside from the Street Profits, the Viking Raiders are the only team that have held that have held the NXT and the Raw tag team titles. If they win the SmackDown tag team titles from the Usos, then both the Viking Raiders and the Street Profits will be the only teams in WWE to hold the Raw, SmackDown, and NXT tag team titles. And I think there was only one other tag team that did that, which ended up being the Revival, or I guess now FTR, on AEW. I don't watch it. It's just from what I've seen on social media, of course. But yeah, the Revival, Dawson and Wilder were the only team to have ever done that, which was impressive. But Street Profits are now on that level. Viking Raiders, they could be on that level if they were able to bring out those Viking instincts and just beat the holy hell out of the Usos, which is a possibility, but you cannot bet against the Usos, so I gotta pick the Usos. Next up, we have a match I never thought we would ever see. It's the clear case of wrestling's past facing off against wrestling's present. Leta, the Hall of Famer, Big Time Becky Lynch, the Raw Women's title. As I had mentioned with Alexa Bliss and Ronda Rousey, the question always becomes, will ring rust come into play? The answer is yes. Ring rust will come into play. Why? It's simple. We have not seen Leta in the ring. Excuse me. Aside from the Royal Rumble, we haven't seen her in the ring since, I believe, Evolution in 2018. Ooh, excuse me. When Leta had teamed up with Trish to take on the team of Alicia Fox and Mickie James, who is now the Impact Knockouts champion, which it was awesome seeing Mickie James in the Rumble. I think with this so-called Forbidden Door now being open, I would love it if Mickie James were to come to WWE, or and defend her Knockouts title at a big show like WrestleMania. Because think of the publicity. Think of the publicity that Impact Wrestling would get if their Knockouts champion defended her title at WrestleMania. Think about that. That would be an awesome match. I would love to see that. But this one is going to be this one will be for the record books, because Becky Lynch has been a dominant champion since she came back to WWE at SummerSlam. And I have to admit, she has been dominant, but let's be real. She tries to cheat. She's cheated to win. And I think that might cost her big against Leta, because Leta is a hell of a performer. But one thing that Becky Lynch will indeed exploit is her neck injuries. Because if you guys remember, on Monday Night Raw in 2004. I'm actually going to look up that night. Let me look it up on my laptop here. I actually want to look up that that night. I believe. Yeah. December 6th, 2004. If you guys remember, on December 6th, 2004, the main event of Monday Night Raw, the WWE Women's title, Leta versus Trish Stratus. The first time ever that women main evented Monday Night Raw, which was a hell of a pay-per-view. Not a pay-per-view, a hell of a main event match. Leta ended up winning that match, thus truly paving the way for the women of today to main event shows like SmackDown, like Raw, like NXT, like NXT UK, like pay-per-views such as WrestleMania, such as SummerSlam. You know, like Charlotte Flair, Naomi, Becky, Doudrop, Nikki ASH, Alexa Bliss, just to name a few. Those superstars of today have main evented pay-per-views, have main evented SummerSlams, all because of women like Trish, women like Leta, women like Chyna, all who are legends, Hall of Famers of this business, is impalpable, absolutely incredible. And Leta was an inspiration to Becky Lynch, which, I mean, come on, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? You know, who wouldn't? Who else but Leta, right? But this is actually Leta's first title match in 16 years. I believe 16 years, which is insane. Insane, because the last time she was champion, she actually defended the women's title at Survivor Series against Mickie James, which was her last match in 2006. Her last match, and I was upset. I was shocked when I saw that Leta was gonna have her last match as an active full-time member of the roster. It was just so hard. It was so heartbreaking, but it made sense because of the neck injuries that Leta suffered earlier in her career. But will that come into play? Yes, it will definitely come into play big time, and I think Becky Lynch will exploit it and just potentially break her neck, thus ending her career, in my honest opinion. But now we've got the WWE title locked inside the Elimination Chamber. Who are the participants? Well, we got the champion, Bobby Lashley. We've got AJ Styles. We've got Riddle, Austin Theory, Seth Rollins, and yes, Brock Lesnar. Here's the thing. Lashley, Rollins, Styles are the only three that have been inside the Elimination Chamber before. Lesnar, Theory, Riddle, never been inside the chamber before. But Lashley is the only person that has won the Elimination Chamber, that being in 2006 at ECW's only pay-per-view that was not One Night Stand, of course, December to Dismember. The funny thing about that night, about that card, was the fact that the Extreme Elimination Chamber match was the only match on the card that was hyped. And the date of ECW's December to Dismember was December 3rd, 2006 at the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia, which was a very interesting pay-per-view, which ended up becoming the only pay-per-view for ECW that was a part of WWE. Now, as far as the reception goes, this was by far one of the worst pay-per-views that ECW had, because Slam Sports, big shout-outs to them, or I guess Canoe.com, I guess is their new thing. Big shout-outs to them, no copyrights of course, is a Canadian, is actually a Canadian sports broadcast, I guess. They rated the pay-per-view 4 out of 10 stars. And the Wrestling Observer, and at the 2007 Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, big shout-outs to the Wrestling Observer, no copyrights of course, y'all know how this works. They voted this event the worst major wrestling show of the year, which was pretty well said, I must admit. Even though this card was just stupid, because the funny thing about this event was a few things. Number one was that 24 hours after the pay-per-view, WWE announced on .com that Vince had sent Paul Heyman home, citing quote, slumping television ratings and a disgruntled talent roster as causes for Mr. Heyman's dismissal. He was escorted from the Coliseum and sent home, and he was immediately pulled from ECW's creative team after the altercation. But funny enough, even though he was pulled from, even though he got released from ECW, he ended up staying with WWE as he was still under contract with WWE as a producer, which was kind of interesting. And Heyman actually wanted CM Punk to win the ECW World Title, but Vince was not having it, and he decided to book Lashley to win the Elimination Chamber. And this card, this was the worst, again, as it said, this was the worst show ever. The card was as follows. There was a dark match on the card. The dark match was Stevie Richards versus Rene Dupree, which ended with Stevie Richards becoming the victor. The main card featured the Hardys, or I guess Team Extreme as they were known in ECW, taking on MNM, Mercury, Nitro, and Melina. This match and the Elimination Chamber was more than 20 minutes, which was stupid. Then, of course, we had Balls Mahoney, big shout. Then, of course, we had Balls Mahoney. He passed away, I think a few years after this, taking on Matt Striker in a Strikers Rules match, which was pretty stupid. Then, of course, we had Elijah Burke and Sylvester Terkay taking on the FBI, the full-blooded Italians, Little Guido, which was basically Nunzio, and Tony Mamaluke, with Trinity in their corner. Then we had Sean Davari with the Great Khali taking on Tommy Dreamer. Then we had Ariel and Kevin Thorne taking on Kelly and Mike Knox. And then we had the Elimination Chamber. Bobby Lashley, Big Show, Paul with Heyman, of course, Test, Rob Van Dam, Hardcore Holly, and CM Punk. Again, this was the worst card of them all. Worst card in ECW history. The order of elimination went as follows: CM Punk, Hardcore Holly, Rob Van Dam, Test, and The Big Show. Test eliminated 2 men. Lashley eliminated 2 men. Which was absurd. This Elimination Chamber is a lot different than how it was back then, because of the fact that this is a new, much more revitalized Bobby Lashley than the Bobby Lashley from back in 2006. So the question becomes, who has the advantage going into this match? The answer is Bobby Lashley, because he has a victory inside the chamber. But let's not forget, this is Brock Lesnar we're talking about. Put him inside the Elimination Chamber. That's like putting Brock Lesnar inside the Elimination Chamber is like putting a is like putting a lion in a cage with King Kong. It's just so insane. It is insane. But I think honestly, the one thing that I want to see is Riddle versus Brock Lesnar starting the match. If we get that, we'll be good. Because Riddle has mentioned before, he's mentioned before that he was better than Brock Lesnar. Well, does it come to pass? We will find out. But I don't know. This is a hard one. I think the wild card would definitely have to be Austin Theory, but the odds-on favorite definitely has to be Bobby Lashley. But I think Bobby Lashley is gonna walk out. Is gonna walk out still WWE champion. But that brings me to the question of the day: among the card that we have now, what are your guys' predictions for the Elimination Chamber? And will Brock Lesnar walk out WWE Champion? Let me know in the comments below. And that will do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button if you guys are new to the channel and you guys want to see more premium live event prediction videos in the future. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys do not miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. All the links will be in the description below. And if you guys have any fan mail that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, the info will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.